All right. To go through C.S. Lewis books, I decided to try to start with The Weight of Glory. It has an introduction by somebody, I forget who. I've never been big on introductions. That's someone just talking about what they think about the book, and I don't care. It does have a preface by C.S. Lewis, which is the only part of this I've read so far. I am going to read that just because it talks about why the book is the way it is, but it's like a page. So it says, "This book contains a selection of the too numerous addresses which I was induced to give during the late war and the years that immediately followed it. All were composed in response to personal request and for particular audiences, without thought of subsequent publication. As a result, in one or two places they seem to repeat, though they really anticipated sentences of mine which have already appeared in print. When I was asked to make this collection, I supposed that I could remove such overlappings, but I was mistaken. There comes a time, and it need not always be a long one, when a composition belongs so definitely to the past that the author himself cannot alter it much without the feeling that he is producing a kind of forgery. The period from which these pieces date was, for all of us, an exceptional one, and though I do not think I have altered any belief that they embody, I could not now recapture the tone and temper in which they were written. Nor would those who wanted to have them in a permanent form be pleased with the patchwork. It has therefore seemed better to let them go with only a few verbal corrections." So, as we're reading through this, we may feel like we're reading the same thing again in a couple of places, but now we know why. These chapters, I mean, just sitting by yourself reading wouldn't be terribly long, but reading out loud, they're a little lengthy. So I'm probably just going to try to find a good stopping point and break each chapter up into a few pieces. So chapter 1 is just the title of the book, The Weight of Glory. No, the chapters aren't named. It's just chapter 1. Okay. If you asked 20 good men today what they thought the highest of the virtues, 19 of them would reply, unselfishness. But if you had asked almost any of the great Christians of old, he would have replied, love. You see what has happened? A negative term has been substituted for a positive, and this is of more than philological importance. The negative idea of unselfishness carries with it the suggestion not primarily of securing good things for others, but of going without them ourselves, as if our abstinence and not their happiness was the important point. I do not think this is the Christian virtue of love. The New Testament has lots to say about self-denial, but not about self-denial as an end in itself. We are told to deny ourselves and to take up our crosses in order that we may follow Christ. And nearly every description of what we shall ultimately find if we do so contains an appeal to desire. If there lurks in most modern minds the notion that to desire our own good and earnestly to hope for the enjoyment of it is a bad thing, I submit that this notion has crept in from Kant and the Stoics and in no part from the Christian faith. Indeed, if we consider the unblushing promises of reward and the staggering nature of the rewards promised in the Gospels, it would seem that our Lord finds our desires not too strong, but too weak. We are half-hearted creatures, fooling around with drink and sex and ambition when infinite joy is offered us, like an ignorant child who wants to go on making mud pies in a slum because he cannot imagine what is meant by the offer of a holiday at the sea. We are far too easily pleased. We must not be troubled by unbelievers when they say that this promise of reward makes the Christian life a mercenary affair. There are different kinds of rewards. There is the reward which has no natural connection with the things you do to earn it, and is quite foreign to the desires that ought to accompany those things. Money is not the natural reward of love. That is why we call a man mercenary if he marries a woman for the sake of her money. But marriage is the proper reward for a real lover, and he is not mercenary for desiring it. A general who fights well in order to get a peerage is mercenary. A general who fights for victory is not. victory being the proper reward of battle, as marriage is the proper reward of love. The proper rewards are not simply tacked on to the activity for which they are given, but are the activity itself in consummation. There is also a third case, which is more complicated. An enjoyment of Greek poetry is certainly a proper, and not a mercenary, reward for learning Greek. But only those who have reached the stage of enjoying Greek poetry can tell from their own experience that this is so. The schoolboy beginning Greek grammar cannot look forward to his adult enjoyment of Sophocles as a lover looks forward to marriage or a general to victory. He has to begin by working for marks, or to escape punishment, or to please his parents, or at best, in the hope of a future good which he cannot at present imagine or desire. His position, therefore, bears a certain resemblance to that of the mercenary. The reward he is going to get will, in actual fact, be a natural or proper reward, but he will not know that till he has got it. Of course, he gets it gradually. Enjoyment creeps in upon the mere drudgery, and nobody could point to a day or an hour when the one ceased and the other began. But it is just insofar as he approaches the reward that he becomes able to desire it for its own sake. Indeed, the power of so desiring is itself a preliminary reward. The Christian, in relation to heaven, is in much the same position as the schoolboy. Those who have attained everlasting life in the vision of God doubtless know very well that it is no mere bribe, but the very consummation of their earthly discipleship. But we who have not yet attained it cannot know this in the same way, and cannot even begin to know it at all, except by continuing to obey and finding the first reward of our obedience in our increasing power to desire the ultimate reward. Just in proportion as the desire grows, our fear lest it should be a mercenary desire will die away and finally be recognized as an absurdity. But probably this will not, for most of us, happen in a day. Poetry replaces grammar, gospel replaces law, longing transforms obedience, as gradually as the tide lifts a grounding ship. I do like the points that C.S. Lewis makes when he's writing these books, but I feel like, and probably partly because this was originally a speech, from what I gathered, I feel like there's a lot of flowing words trying to get an idea across, instead of just being kind of, here's where we're going. He talks around the point and spirals in my mind. Anyway. But there is one other important similarity between the schoolboy and ourselves. If he is an imaginative boy, he will, quite probably, be reveling in the English poets and romancers suitable to his age sometime before he begins to suspect that Greek grammar is going to lead him to more and more enjoyments of the same sort. He may even be neglecting his Greek to read Shelley and Swinburne in secret. In other words, the desire which Greek is really going to gratify already exists in him, and is attached to objects which seem to him quite unconnected with Xenophon and the verbs in me, which is Greek mi, not the English word me. Now, if we are made for heaven, the desire for our proper place will already be in us, but not yet attached to the true object, and will even appear as the rival of that object. And this, I think, is just what we find. No doubt there is one point in which my analogy of the schoolboy breaks down. The English poetry which he reads when he ought to be doing Greek exercises may be just as good as the Greek poetry to which the exercises are leading him. So then, if fixing on Milton instead of journeying on to Asclepius, a Greek name, his desire is not embracing a false object. But our case is very different. If a transtemporal, transfinite good is our real destiny, then any other good on which our desire fixes must be in some degree fallacious, must bear at best only a symbolic relation to what will truly satisfy. In speaking of this desire for our own far-off country, which we find in ourselves even now, I feel a certain shyness. I am almost committing an indecency. I am trying to rip open the inconsolable secret in each one of you, the secret which hurts so much that you take your revenge on it by calling it names like nostalgia and romanticism and adolescence. The secret also which pierces with such sweetness that when, in very intimate conversation, the mention of it becomes imminent, we grow awkward and affect to laugh at ourselves. The secret we cannot hide and cannot tell, though we desire to do both. We cannot tell it because it is a desire for something that has never actually appeared in our experience. We cannot hide it because our experience is constantly suggesting it, and we betray ourselves like lovers at the mention of a name. Our commonest expedient is to call it beauty and behave as if that had settled the matter. Wordsworth's expedient was to identify it with certain moments in his own past. But all this is a cheat. If Wordsworth had gone back to those moments in the past, he would not have found the thing itself, but only the reminder of it. What he remembered would turn out to be itself a remembering. The books or the music in which we thought the beauty was located will betray us if we trust to them. It was not in them, it only came through them. And what came through them was a longing. These things, the beauty, the memory of our own past, are good images of what we really desire. But if they are mistaken for the thing itself, they turn into dumb idols, breaking the hearts of their worshippers. For they are not the thing itself. They are only the scent of a flower we have not found, the echo of a tune we have not heard, news from a country we have never yet visited. Do you think I am trying to weave a spell? Perhaps I am, but remember your fairy tales. Spells are used for breaking enchantments as well as for inducing them. And you and I have need of the strongest spell that can be found to wake us from the evil enchantment of worldliness which has been laid upon us for nearly 100 years. Almost our whole education has been directed to silencing this shy, persistent inner voice. Almost all our modern philosophies have been devised to convince us that the good of man is to be found on this earth. And yet, it is a remarkable thing that such philosophies of progress or creative evolution themselves bear reluctant witness to the truth that our real goal is elsewhere. When they want to convince you that earth is your home, notice how they set about it. They begin by trying to persuade you that earth can be made into heaven, thus giving a sop to your sense of exile in earth as it is. Next, they tell you that this fortunate event is still a good way off in the future, thus giving a sop to your knowledge that the fatherland is not here and now. I don't know if I'm saying this word right. Sop, S-O-P, I don't know what that means, or how to say it. We're going to find out quick. Pause. When you have Google at your fingertips, why would you not check what something is, especially when it's coming up multiple times? A thing given or done as a concession of no great value to appease someone whose main concerns or demands are not being met. And the pronunciation is S-A-P, but the A has the two dots over it. So maybe elongate. So maybe I'm saying it right. SOP. Okay. So basically we're conceding or making the concessions that sure, Earth is okay and could be heaven on earth and it's a long way off. Okay. Sorry about that. Finally, lest your longing for the transtemporal should awake and spoil the whole affair, they use any rhetoric that comes to hand to keep out of your mind the recollection that even if all the happiness they promise could come to men on earth, yet still each generation would lose it by death, including the last generation of all, and the whole story would be nothing, not even a story, forever and ever. Hence, all the nonsense that Mr. Shaw puts into the final speech of the Lilith, and Bergson's remark that the Elan Vital is capable of surmounting all obstacles, perhaps even death, as if we could believe that any social or biological development on this planet will delay the senility of the sun or reverse the second law of thermodynamics. Yeah, C.S. Lewis is a little tougher to read than other books. I think I'm going to try to read maybe another page or so, and then we might call it quits. Do what they will, then, we remain conscious of a desire which no natural happiness will satisfy. But is there any reason to suppose that reality offers any satisfaction to it? Nor does the being hungry prove that we have bread. And that was in quotes, that sentence. Nor does the being hungry prove that we have bread. I suppose that was a saying of the time, at least in England. But I think that it may be urged that this misses the point. A man's physical hunger does not prove that men will get any bread. He may die of starvation on a raft in the Atlantic. But surely a man's hunger does prove that he comes of a race which repairs its body by eating and inhabits a world where edible substances exist. In the same way, though I do not believe, I wish I did, that my desire for paradise proves that I shall enjoy it, I think it is a pretty good indication that such a thing exists, and that some men will. A man may love a woman and not win her, but it would be very odd if the phenomenon called falling in love occurred in a sexless world. Here, then, is the desire, still wandering and uncertain of its object, and still largely unable to see that object in the direction where it really lies. Our sacred books give us some account of the object. It is, of course, a symbolical account. Heaven is, by definition, outside of our experience, but all intelligible descriptions must be of things within our experience. The scriptural picture of heaven is therefore just as symbolic as the picture which our desire, unaided, invents for itself. Heaven is not really full of jewelry any more than it is really the beauty of nature, or a fine piece of music. The difference is that the scriptural imagery has authority. It comes to us from writers who were closer to God than we, and it has stood the test of Christian experience down the centuries. The natural appeal of this authoritative imagery is to me at first very small. At first sight it chills rather than awakes my desire, and that is just what I ought to expect. If Christianity could tell me no more of the far-off land than my own temperament led me to surmise already, then Christianity would be no higher than myself. If it has more to give me, I expect it to be less immediately attractive than my own stuff. Sophocles at first seems dull and cold to the boy who has only reached Shelley. If our religion is something objective, then we must never avert our eyes from those elements in it which seem puzzling or repellent, for it will be precisely the puzzling or the repellent which conceals what we do not yet know and need to know. There's not really a good stopping point. I guess because this was a speech. It's not broken up by ideas. It's just, yeah. I said we stop there for now. He's going to go on right here talking about the promises of Scripture, which I think will be interesting. I like a lot more talking about what we can get out of Scripture than how we develop in our mindsets. I think this will be worth reading. I think there's going to be some places where we're like, come on, get going. But we'll see. Oh, there is a... Well, the chapters do have names. Is chapter 1 just the title of the book, The Weight of Glory? Let's see. It is. Chapter 1 is The Weight of Glory. It's just the name of the book. Okay. That's why I was confused. All right. If you'd like to keep going, we can pick up there and keep going. If you're not crazy about this book, we can try a different one, or we can try a different author. You can let me know what you're into, what you're interested in. I'm going to try to get better about clearly pronouncing the words I'm seeing. Reading out loud is not something I've done much or in a while, so you can tell I'm a little bit rusty. But anyway, that was the first little chunk of chapter 1.